Welcome everybody to our True Self Talk right after our Connect with Your True Self Energy Self-Healing session, a monthly free session open for everybody. My name is Jona Bryndis. I'm an energy healer, energy coach and trainer, and with me is Abby, who co-facilitated the session with me. She's a trained and certified energy healer and reader, and together we go through your guys' energies as you are in deep meditation, in deep sort of in your inner connection process. And this true self-talk that we do right after is here for you to share, for you to perhaps inquire about your energy, share your own experiences, kind of like as if we were sharing dreams. It's a continuation of the energy talks where we can talk about things that we can't really talk to other people to. So Abby, as I have you here and you facilitated the session with me, do you want to introduce yourself real quick and maybe give us sort of a first impression of what this session felt like to you?
Hi, Jona. Yes, I'm happy to do that. I always try to remember that usually you advise that we kind of go for like the physical feelings first of all, because that's important to relate to how the body feels. So I felt a push forward of our energy field, like kind of like wanting things, like pushing forward, anticipation. And I felt the barrier between the heart and the solar plexus as well, kind of like in sense of like feeling a burning in my body.
But you are aware that those are energetic sensations. That's not those are not actually physical.
Oh no!
I mean, for you they are. For you they are. But it's cool that you can laugh about it because I didn't mean to correct you. I'm just saying this is quite advanced stuff that you're talking about there. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, in terms of, I mean, maybe the physical, I mean, I mean, I did feel like kind of, and I think you referred to it as well at the beginning, like there was kind of like an energeticness about the group, and but at the same time, I also felt like a flow, like between us as a group, and a wholeness. Those are the words that I kind of jotted down. So in a sense, although there was a lot going on, it felt like there was a kind of a level of peace attached to it for some reason. Like a lot going on, but an underlying sense of like it's okay, because like the mind can't handle everything that's going on in a way.
Yeah, that's a big insight for us when we get to that place, that we actually realize that when we do energy sessions, the mind can't handle it. It's beyond our mind's not ability to understand, but to interpret at the time that it's going on. So a lot of times it's important that we take this contemplation or this integration time when we do an energy session. So most people will say, "Oh, I didn't feel anything," and then when you ask them, like what they did or how their body felt throughout this hour, they'll report a lot of things. So it's not necessarily just what we think we feel or get. Yeah, it's more so really giving it context and understanding what it actually is that is being communicated to us.
Yeah, I mean that's something else I often note. Like one of the reasons why I enjoy doing co-facilitation is because although it can end up like kind of multitasking or being quite busy, the thing I like about it is that it takes my mind out of it. Obviously I have to use my mind to do that, but it's like I don't think about it. I literally just feel. But often when I do things by myself, then often I get too caught up in the head and the critical inner voice, and then I start doubting my experience. So what I realize is that when you don't think about things, it's all there already. It's just kind of just waiting to be expressed and communicated.
That's really the thing. This is the reason why we do this session right after. We didn't do this the first, I don't know, 8 years or so. I wrote a report and then people could comment on it in the forum. We still have the forum, but this live talk is actually exactly for this part, namely for that translation part, for the expressing part, because when we hear ourselves say things, it triggers a bunch of stuff. So this is where the mind comes in. So the mind tries to grasp things based on linear and rational sort of paradigms, and we can't. I mean, like the most exquisite and deepest experiences, they may just last half a second, right? I mean, you may just have a glimpse of something, and all of a sudden, everything shifts in you, and your whole entire energy, starts to expand, or you start feeling at home, or it's kind of like when you enter a store and there's like, a certain type of music playing or a certain scent, it's very hard to consciously make that out. What influenced you at that moment? In fact, for most people, it's even hard to consciously notice when their energy shifts. And so that's where the training aspect comes in, right? So we can all connect with our true self at any given time. The problem with that is we don't do it, okay? And it's not because we think it's, useless or whatever. It's because we simply forget that there is something like a true self, like the core of ourself, that is always present. The core of us. That you mentioned, the critical inner voice, the negative inner self-talk. That was extremely strong in this session. And what happens when that occurs, when we have a strong, say, inner dialogue going on, and we are not fully aware on what level that takes place, what happens is that we tend to identify ourselves with this voice, right? Like, you hear something like, oh, you should have done this, or oh, you still need to do that, or or why did you do that, or let's say, even if you start connecting deeper with yourself, you start feeling like, oh man, I really missed out on so many opportunities, to express myself, or to reach my higher potential. So there's a multitude of things that are going on when we connect with the core of ourselves. And
something I'd like to add to that around the critical inner voice is like once you become aware of that, and then you also become aware that you have the opportunity to express yourself, it's about overcoming that ego part of you, because like how I feel about that is it makes me feel incredibly vulnerable, like the thought that I can express myself, and actually like my true self can be bigger than the critical inner voice, it makes you feel incredibly vulnerable as well. So
the vulnerability, that's something that in this session I felt, because I went through all your guys' energies, sort of originating in that confusion within, in that subsism, about like not clearly being able to identify which is which. Is this my true self talking, or is this my ego talking? And so what you just said is really important, because without training that, you can sit there and meditate, as long as you want. I mean, obviously, eventually, you're gonna learn how to discern that. So the more often we meditate, we do energy sessions, or we, sort of cultivate this deeper inner contemplation, the more familiar we become with our true self, even if it is just for a few seconds each time, which then allows us to have a better reference system, a better reference feeling for when something is really, really true to us. And when something doesn't feel true. When you hear this voice in the background that, sort of coaches you, like the inner coach, right? It says, oh, no, you can't do that. Or, better don't do that. Or, yeah, do that. And, especially people who are energetically sensitive and who are on the spiritual path, they often experience a strong sort of opposition within themselves, where they have this one voice that says one thing and the other voice that says the other thing. And what you just said, you know, this vulnerability that you picked up on, that's because we don't really feel that we can trust our true self yet. And the answer is we can't, but there is a whole sort of aspect that we are not seeing, and that is we can't trust our mind. That's the first thing that we need to recognize, not because we're not intelligent enough or whatever, or because we don't know enough. This is not about that at all. It's about understanding how our mind thinks and how the ego plays into the mind, how certain aspects of our whole being, if you will, influence what we are thinking, how we see the world, what framework, what mindsets we are using to interpret. It's like an operating system in technical terms. We cannot really trust the operating system. Why is that? I would like to turn that question over to you guys, what it is that you have found out so far in your life on that quest, on that journey to better understanding yourself, to get a more clear reference feeling for when something is true to you. What you've discovered is elements or factors or aspects that can function like a hidden agenda of your ego that can influence the way you see things. What is not just necessarily in this session, but this session was very much about that, very much about understanding ourself better. And with that, also understanding our ego and our ego mind better. What are some of the things that you've discovered on your quest to, say, familiarizing or connecting with your true self more? What's in the way? Does anybody want to share?
I could get the ball rolling.
Yeah, get the ball rolling.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of like, because as soon as we acknowledge that the ego exists and it can have such a negative impact on my, I see that it can, how negative its impact can be or has been on my life, really. But also the acknowledgement that it's a part of me and it's extremely useful and that it indicates many things to me. So one of the things that came up for me in this session was, when my ego's kind of going in overdrive, or when there's something going on that's kind of like overdrive, then I need to listen to it. Like, I don't need to be afraid of it or try to shut it down or suppress it. That it needs to be kind of like opened up and investigated and like kind of welcomed and listened to, which doesn't mean I'm going to act on it, but there's a deep inner need there. There's a desire there and even if it's my ego, that's still a part of me, and I need to acknowledge it and listen to it.
By the way, that aspect, Abby, since you're mentioning this had a lot to do with the overall high vibe of the session. Yes, because even though it was a bit mental, meaning that we were like in our heads a lot, there was this wholeness aspect or oneness, I think you called this in the beginning, that allowed us to see that, okay, so my ego or ego mind is part of me. It's part of this whole journey. And all I really need to know is how it functions so that I can better understand when, for example, when I'm driven by my ego or when I allow my ego to drive me. So the cool thing about this session was that there was a distinction in most of you between what your true self is, the sort of the I, that's me awareness, that's the core of me, and the different layers that influence how you feel about yourself, and then obviously how you interpret and contextualize things that are happening to you. I've never seen this so clearly than before than in this session, the different layers and how they influence you. I mean, you know, for me as someone who reports about energies all the time, I, you know, have a navigation system in my mind because I, you know, just due to the experience that I have. So when I, for example, report about collective energies, or when I do the energetic tune-up, yeah, where I take the energies of the following month and literally send them through your energy field to see, you know, how your system is going to handle those energies. Yeah, so it's not really a prediction, it's more so, you know, something that I use to approximate, you know, how you're most likely going to feel about it based on where you're at right now. If you change something, and this is the purpose of the energetic tune-up, if you change something through understanding better what it is that is being triggered in you, yeah, and what aspects are, you know, triggers for you in the first place, yeah, because we're not all the same. We all have different triggers. We all have different layers that can influence us more. Then you understand better what, for example, the importance of collective energies, or, you know, tribal energies, yeah, based on the country or the tribe of origin that you have, or, you know, how the, you know, your family karma, how that influences the way you see yourself, and ultimately also how you know, manifest things, and whether these manifestations are even, you know, sort of in line with that. So many of us have a confusion there, even though we can feel sort of our inner truth, we still aren't clear why certain things affect us more than other things. And that was like when Abby and I co-facilitated the session, we were mostly talking about ourselves. Yeah, so while I was reading your guys' energies, and I did 2 readings on your energy, you know, one to begin with, and then one later in the session when it was more clear to me what the context was. And it was very interesting for me to see how the majority of participants are primarily influenced by their critical inner voice, which is not the case for everybody, but in this group it was. And so we talked about the ego mind a little bit, and ego. Now let's do this together here. Let's investigate that. Who of you experienced sort of or encountered their critical inner voice during the session? As in, like, you know, telling you what not to do, or why am I even doing this, or, you know, sort of random stuff that you know, your to-do list, or you know, things that just distracted you from, you know, manifesting your will to connect with your true self. Who have you experienced this during the session? Well, I did. Carol, you did too. Okay. So, okay. So, yes, exactly. Okay, you guys all did. Okay, wonderful. Do you have any idea where that is coming from? Have you ever taken a moment to investigate the nature of your critical inner voice? Let's do this together. The nature of it. What does it sound like? First of all, let me just warm you up a little bit when you go and work with your critical inner voice. How does your critical inner voice talk to you? Does it talk to you in a way that it identifies with you? So it talks to yourself in first person, like, oh, I'm so bad. Oh, I'm this. I should be doing. Does it talk to you in first person? Does it talk to you in second person? You are so bad. You should be doing this. No, you shouldn't be doing. Or does it talk to you in third person, which is, not that common. Like, oh, Jona is really, whatever, distracted today, or any kind of judgments. So that's a good way to start when you want to understand your own critical inner voice better. Because the critical inner voice is the overlay. That's what is influencing your connection at this point. Yeah. Second person, Linda, for you. So it talks to you in a way like you are this, you are, or you do this, or why didn't you do this? Okay. What do you think this expresses when your critical inner voice talks to you in you should? Yeah, exactly. When your critical inner voice talks to you in a second person, feel into this. Isn't it almost like there's another person there? It's like you're talking to a clone of you. Yeah, or exactly, feels like mom. Wonderful. That's exactly what I wanted you to see. It sounds or feels like someone whom you given some kind of authority in your life. And very often it is our parents or grandparents. For some people, it can also be, depending on the alignment, it can be God or, some kind of more sort of one should not do that, like sort of collective kind of voice. Okay, this is very important for those of you who hear their critical inner voice in second person. That means that what is actually going on there, I mean, it's a bit more complex like that than that, but it is a really good indicator, is that you are playing tapes. Those are recordings. Those are things that have actually been said to you or, similar sounding. So it's not always the words, but it is the feeling that comes with those words that you get from your negative inner self-talk or critical inner voice. So when it feels like a parent, okay, and this doesn't mean that it's, that your parent, that it's your parent's fault that you can't connect with your true self. That's not what it means. So be careful with the jumping to conclusion. What it means is that there is something going on that you are not consciously aware of. When a tape plays, it's like, a broken record. It's actually super annoying. You guys know what I mean, right? If there's a broken record and it keeps repeating over and over and over again, it's very annoying. So from an energetic point of view, it takes a lot of energy to fade that out. Can you guys follow me? So you have to exert energy in order to fade something that plays like a recording that has a sort of an instant commentary on everything that you're thinking, that you're doing, and so forth. This, in your case, Linda, is one of your barriers. And if that is in the foreground, if the critical inner voice is in the foreground, then that means that you are influenced by your personal family stuff, okay? Which means that you are not in full connection with yourself right now, because I happen to know this because you were in Iceland with us, so I know who you are. You're a grown-up person, you're a grown-up woman. You don't, your mom isn't running your life. Yeah, and this is relevant here, what you're sharing, and it tapped you out. It felt to you that you couldn't overcome it in order to connect. And that is, from an energetic point of view, exactly what it is. Except for it's not your mom's fault. Okay, that's the part that we need to remember. Yeah, so your mom may just repeat a recording that she's heard all her life. And you, as a mom, being a mom, may even catch yourself talking that way to your own child. Has this ever happened to you, Linda? It happens to me. If I say something in a certain tone, in a certain way, and I'm like, whoa, I sound just like my mom. Never. Yes. So you see how sneaky that is. This is a part of the reason why we can't trust our mind. See, because our mind doesn't detect that. It doesn't detect when there's sort of a broken record going that has, let's say, no relevance anymore today. It may have formed, and this would be another layer then of, sort of barrier. It may have formed mindsets in us, entire belief systems, entire programs. Yeah, so if you are hearing things like you should, okay, and I'm pretty sure that you should can be pretty much that can come up in any situation, but it comes in with this sort of authoritarian kind of, if you don't, then almost like a threat, or almost like a, calling you on this higher authority. If you actually work with this, you can uncover, and in the process of uncovering it, then also deprogram yourself and reprogram yourself. We can uncover what it is that is literally running undetected by your mind in the background as a program, determining how you see things, how you see yourself, how you talk with others, how you express yourself, and how you see the world. And when that happens, when we become aware of that, it's quite shocking at first. Because we have been told, we have been trained, okay, through our society's school system, etc., that our mind is sort of unvaluable, right? For as long as we stay rational, for as long as we stay within sort of a certain level of, logic. The problem with that is, and this is why I made that statement earlier, that when it comes to connecting with our true self, it's not really about, feeling your true self more, being better in order to connect better. No, it's about removing the stuff that is in the way. And when we find out that it's mostly our mind that's in the way, it leads to a little bit of a deadlock, just like how you described this, tapped you out. Yeah, because then at that moment, you don't really know how to tackle that, because you believe that your mind is speaking truth, if you will. Yeah, that you should, blah, 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 is true. But what if it's not? And that is where the true self can help us. The true self is not the adversary or the counter energy to the ego. The true self is the part in us that can discern. Maybe you should do whatever, that your critical inner voice said. Maybe you should, but not right now. Because right now, you have the intention to connect with your true self. You can do the should later. And right now, you're executing your power through your will. And there's nothing and nobody that should have the power to, say, distract you from that. And the reason why our mind, and that's just one layer, there's also a lot of emotional layers there, can tap us out and literally give up on connecting with our true self, the one part in us that could discern, is because we are not aware that what we're hearing there is not necessarily true. So your true self is not some kind of absolute higher power or anything. It is linked to your consciousness, and your consciousness is linked to, God, the divine source, universal consciousness, however you want to name this. And there are several layers of, influences on you, yeah, through your, the whole sort of the karma of the entire, karmic humanity, evolutionary path that our humanity has, through, collective energies, through, tribal karma, yeah, where you're from, what your, ancestral lines are, through your nuclear family, the one that you grew up with, and the karma that runs, in the past 7 generations. Then also your experiences, the inner child aspects, the shadow aspects. Those are, the personal karma level, which often manifest as a critical inner voice. And then, of course, we still have our own inner battle with our will, yeah, like the ego battle that takes place within us. So you see that it's quite complex if you want to be able to pinpoint what is influencing you right now, what is blocking you right now from connecting with yourself. So that needs to be trained. And the critical inner voice is one, for many of us, sort of the next layer. It's front and center. It's really not a big deal. That is something that you can learn to overcome with coaching tools and with a little bit of mental training. Yeah, it's a lot harder to overcome, say, trauma, yeah, and emotional, physical, somatic programming. That's a lot harder. Yeah, so sometimes the critical inner voice is linked to our trauma. Yeah, and so we hear something in our inner head, so to speak, that taps us out because it brings up fears around something that we unconsciously feared that it repeats. But there's a bunch of other layers to this that are not visible to us, that have to do with spiritual and energetic aspects. Yeah, like, for example, the tribal aspect is not aware to most people. Yeah, like, how does it matter where you were born, in what country, what place you live in? Yeah, and some of us respond to, say, tribal karma by immigrating from their country of origin. Yeah, trying to decouple from that. They're unaware of it at the time, but most people, which includes myself, who do not live in the same country that they were born in and where their sort of family of origin is, have very strong tribal karma. Yeah, we still carry something from that tribe of origin that we need to liberate ourselves from. And some of us even carry aspects that have to do with humanity as a whole. Yeah, that came here with the soul plan that included, to be of service in a very particular role. And it can influence our way of thinking and our way of being, to the point where, Abby, you called this vulnerable, but to the point where we're so confused that we, try everything but the one thing that we came here for. Yeah, this constant seeking, for example. But coming back to the critical inner voice, I just wanted to double check, Linda, is that something that you can use, maybe as a snippet or an inspiration to work more with your critical inner voice, yeah, by seeing it like a tape that is playing in the background, and it's your job to stop that tape. So your energy was very busy around, decoupling and liberating. This is, I think, something that I said to you before. Most of your inner conflicts that you experience have to do with, you feeling the impulse to liberate yourself from certain things, but at the same time feeling that, strong conflict around that, in regards to responsibilities or duties or commitments and so forth. So most of your energy is, kind of poofing away, yeah, and not that you're doing anything wrong, but because there is so much energy still in trying to fade that conflict out. So my tip for you and everybody here who experiences a very strong critical inner voice that that can block your connection with your own inner truth, say your true needs, your true wants, all right, is systematic work with your critical inner voice. Yeah, here in the Sacred Self-Healing community, we do workshops with that. It's not that hard, and it's so liberating when once you realize what the true nature of your critical inner voice is, and that you can actually do something about that. Yesterday, I had a conversation, and somebody asked me, and this is a wonderful question: am I allowed to talk back to my critical inner voice? Abby, do you have anything to say about that? Do you
Oh,
remember?
yeah, I do get. I still get very confused about my critical inner voice, but yeah, I mean, I certainly talk back at it now, and yeah, but I mean, it's my critical voice is very insidious.
Yeah, so they sound differently for us, and they also come from different places, right? So they're not, it's
Mm.
not always this maternal or paternal or higher
Yeah.
authority kind of in a voice. It can also, especially when it's in first person form, like
Mm.
it can be very degrading, very,
Yeah.
um,
I, I find that music helps, and
nice.
talking helps, and like making myself talk when I don't want to, like communicating, like being vulnerable. I know that that's like a very good antidote to my critical inner voice. It works really well. Yeah, when I
Yeah, because
can.
there's something that happens when you share your truth. You actually hear your own voice in your own skull, right? It
Hmm.
is more powerful than the critical inner voice at that
Yeah,
moment. And
yeah.
even, and this is part of what I recommend everybody when you want to work with your critical inner voice, even repeating your critical inner voice out loud. Yeah. So in these workshops, for example, I make people reenact their critical inner voice and perhaps even make a little bit fun of it. Okay, because it is something that once we allow ourselves to actually see it for what it is, that is super annoying to us. Yeah, our critical inner voices, they sound like an annoying parent or an annoying toddler. Yeah, or like our first grade teacher, or something along those lines. Yeah, where when we give this a voice and we say it out loud, we can realize how negative it is, how destructive, how degrading, and how we would, in 3D life, in real life, never allow anybody to talk to us like that. And that's really important, because the moment you realize that you allow your inner self-talk to be of that nature, something you would never allow anybody else to do to you, where is the part that says no more? Stop it. So for many of you, your critical inner voice has a job. It has a task. It's not there for no reason. And that task has to do, when if this comes up, especially when you want to connect deeper, when you want to connect with your true self and your critical inner voice comes up, then your task is to learn how to stand up to it, how to make your stance as the I, yeah, the true self that you are, and not some repeated stuff yeah, that is playing like a broken record. So a lot of times, and this is the beauty of self-healing, when we discover this, that the things that are in the way, the blocks, the things that block us, be it our ego or inner child, shadow, or, fear of confrontation, whatever it is there for a reason, namely to teach us what it is that we need to focus on. And the reason why I know this is because what happens if we ignore it, if we don't become aware of it, if we let it slide, is that it tends to get worse. It tends to get worse. So all of you critical inner voice sufferers, okay, know that you have the right to speak up. You have the right to stop. Okay, always maybe write down what your critical inner voice says or repeat what your critical inner voice, because then it becomes more aware to you how degrading it actually is. And the golden rule when it comes to like what is my true self and what is not is that if it's degrading, if it's minimizing, if it's authoritarian, if it's destructive, it's not your true self. Before we come to an end, let's then define what the true self voice or, true self guidance or the counterpart to that. What does it feel like to actually hear your true self? Does anybody want to share? What does it feel like? And that obviously only works if you've actually had something like a touchdown with your true self, something that was unmistakable, that is true to you, that is sort of an absolute truth to you. What does that sound like? What does that feel like? To me, it feels reassuring, forgiving, empowering, loving, and most and foremost, unconditional. Sorry for the dog barking. Unconditional. It doesn't judge. That is what your true self sounds like. Your ego and the mouthpiece of your ego, the critical inner voice, is not capable of expressing lovingness or unconditionality. It doesn't feel that. It's not interested in empowering you. It's not interested in, making you feel strong. Not because it's mean or because it's bad, but because it doesn't have a concept of that. It doesn't have a concept of what it is that you truly need or truly want. So the ego and the critical inner voice and all these other layers that I mentioned earlier, I'm going to write them up for you in a brief report. They're not bad. They're not dark. They're not evil. They're always there. And whether or not you let your connection with your true self be dominated by that, be run by that, that depends on the stance that you can make. And the stronger your stance becomes, the less you will be bothered by those things that disconnect you, that, block your inner connection. So in order to become able to connect deeper, you don't need to be better at anything. You don't need to acquire anything. You don't need to like get somewhere. You just need to become more able, more aware of what is in the way, and then focus on minimizing that, on not giving that the power to disconnect you. And it's totally okay if you struggle with that a little bit. Yeah, then keep doing it. Keep listening to the 5-minute true self-alignment, or get your favorite piece of music. Abby, you said that music works well for you. It doesn't even have to be a spoken meditation or invocation or anything like that. Yes, whatever works. Yeah, or go out in the woods, take a walk in nature, or brush or pet your dog, or play with your kids, or whatever it is that can get you there. Keep doing that and prioritize that over all these other, layers of distraction, yeah, that our world presents to us. There's plenty of those distractions out there. It's not just a critical inner voice, but that one is the hardest one to overcome because we identify with it. We think that that is what we are thinking. That is not the case. All right, everyone. I hope that this is sort of inspiring you, or that there are snippets in there that you can use for, understanding yourself better, for, knowing, or being able to identify better what is in the way. Unless you have any specific questions, I want to thank you, Abby, for being there during the session, for co-facilitating with me, and for being here. Thank you so much for doing
Thank you,
that.
Jona. It's been a lovely session. It's really been very helpful.
Yeah, so sometimes the connection with our true self allows us to recognize something, or allows us to realize something, allows us to see something more clearly. Yeah, so don't always expect the connection with your true self to be this sort of blissy type of feeling. Sometimes it isn't. And that's not because your true self is angry at you or something. No, it's because you are feeling what is in the way. And then you need to pay attention to that and work with that, not give up and say, oh, don't let yourself get frustrated. These layers that you encounter there are the layers that control your actions, your choices, your mind, and your emotions. So connecting with your true self is probably one of the most powerful modalities that we can engage with. And that's why it's free, because it is the most important one. And for those of you who have, very specific circumstances, or, things to work through in their lives, you can work with me as an energy coach, because there are some things that we cannot work through ourselves. Yeah, we need, let's say, a third party, or we need someone who can help us with contextualizing things. That's what energy coaching is for. Yes, thank you, Kirsten. So happy that you came. Wonderful, guys. So I'm going to let you go, and I assume that some of these things that we talked about and that we experienced during the energy session will most likely unfold for you here throughout the next week. I already did the reading for September. We have the energetic tune-up coming up on Saturday. So if you want to have a personal reading for September, then come to that. It's very similar. It's an energy session, and then we have a live talk right after. I can tell you that this came forward here today is one of the most important tools we need for September. Yeah, because September comes in with a lot of mental schisms. Yeah, where we can literally get lost in, this confusion, or this vulnerability that we feel through not truly being able to feel ourselves. And from my perspective, this is our collective task. Yeah, and Abby, you picked up on it. Just my last sentence, I promise. Whenever we feel something in this this membrane, this this connection between our third chakra, which is our will, and also the seat of our ego, and our heart, our fourth chakra, that's when we're dealing with a collective task. That is what we are all working on right now. So stop beating yourself up. Stop feeding your critical inner voice, okay? And see it for what it is. This is the most important task that we all have in this time, to grow beyond that, to learn how to discern truth, okay? And some days it will work great and other days it won't work great. That's the training. Thank you, guys. Love you and see you soon.